started. I'm just going to hit record and I'll share my screen and we'll jump into the PowerPoint. Okay. All right, so now I'm just gotta move or minimize my little menu board. Okay. All right, so today we're going to be talking about our Unit 3 assignment, which is the Rocky Mountain Mutual Memo. And I like to kind of just start this unit off by orienting everybody to the basics of what the case is, kind of like with Unit 1, where we were playing a certain role and we were inserted into a scenario and given a task. It's the same setup here, only different scenario, different task. So in this case, you are working at Rocky Mountain Mutual, which is an insurance company that's located in Utah, which means it's in a rural area. And why would I include that bit of demographic information? Well, if we rewind again all the way back to even before Unit 1, just the first week of class, we talked about rhetoric. And one of the things that should inform your rhetorical approach to any piece of writing is, in fact, the geographical setting or even societal customs within the area that you are writing. So I wanted to point that out, not because it makes a huge difference in this case, but just because it could in other types of writing. So you should always just make sure that you're aware of how the geography or location of a particular piece of writing might impact that. So who is involved? You, obviously, and you're Joe, you're the manager of the claims department. And then the other key player here is Zach, who is the VP of operations, and he's senior to you in this particular case. Sorry, guys, my menu bar is right in my way, but we'll just leave it. Okay. So keeping in mind while you're starting to formulate your ideas, Zach is a money guy. That's what he cares about. He cares about the bottom line. He's also a very long-term employee, which means that he probably feels very secure in all of the decisions that he makes, and he has a lot of confidence. So you do have to consider that when you're figuring out the tone that you're going to use. And he's a little bit stubborn. We kind of already know that from reading the case. The problem that we're facing is that Zach wants to close the fitness center, primarily because he thinks it's a waste of money and he thinks that fitness is pointless anyway, kind of like, who needs it? So your task is very simple on the surface. You're going to be writing a memo to Zach. And this is kind of an interesting case because it's a solicited memo. Zach has actually said, hey, you know what? I'm willing to hear you out. Put this together in writing and I'll take a look. That's not always the case when you're trying to basically propose a decision to go one way or another. So this is definitely an opportunity. He did open the door. So you want to take that and run with it and just make sure that you pat him on the back as well, so that you can kind of meet what you know about him as your reader. Your purpose within the memo, of course, then is to convince Zach that the fitness center should stay open. And this means that you have to show him that the fitness center can be valuable in some way, that even though it's costing them money, there are in fact outputs related to fitness and wellness that are directly relevant to the company's costs in terms of health insurance and employees calling off and things like that. So that's, even if I ended the meeting here, I really just gave you like the key to the whole puzzle, which is making sure that you ground your memo in facts that you can find just easily from Googling in terms of how healthy employees actually make the company more money and cost them less. So that's the idea you really want to pitch. And then of course you'll have a lot of supplemental sub ideas built in there as well. But that's your selling point here. That's what's going to get the money guy, is going back to money. Last but not least, you should be writing professionally since you're writing upward, but not stiff. I mean, you have a relationship with this guy. He seems pretty casual based on the way that he has conversed with you. So you don't want to alienate him or come across like you're some 15th century scholar. You want to write, conversationally yet respectfully. So that's the key. You should always be respectful, but it can have a little bit of casual tone since you're coworkers. Okay, a couple of tips for you guys, the do's and the don'ts. The do's are pretty straightforward. Remember your formatting, have that header up top, make sure you're using short paragraphs, bullet points, descriptive headings. You can even use images and visuals in this document, but that's especially helpful like if they're data driven, so you can be showing Zach how healthy employees cost the company less through a graph that's easy to understand. You can incorporate those kinds of things into the formatting as well if you want. Do use outside research, that's required. I think two is the required, but more is better here. And this is a super easy topic to research on the web. Like it's just well known that healthy employees are better for companies. So you should not have any problem finding multiple resources to support any ideas. I already talked about that. So on to the don'ts. And these are ideas actually over the years that students have come up with. Like, and when I used to teach on campus, we would do a lot of brainstorming sessions. And these were things that were pitched as ideas. And then as a class, like we would strike them out like, no, this is too problematic or it's not really realistic. So some of those that I'm recommending you don't base your memo on are that the fitness center cannot start to become profitable by selling memberships to the community. On the surface seems like a great idea. However, the their parking lot is most likely not prepared to handle a community's worth of fitness traffic. They probably also don't want to take on the additional insurance and liabilities that can come with inviting the public into their company's workspace. So overall, that one's not a good idea. The fitness center should not start charging employees. That's just ridiculous. It's just not a good idea. So ways of making the fitness center profitable don't actually involve charging people. When you're reading the case, you're going to see that Joe did do this like small quote unquote study within the claims department. And while the information or the results that he found are interesting and they certainly point toward fitness being a positive thing, that was not like an actual study. It was not grounded in any type of scientific approach or anything like that. It was just a guy writing down some numbers and calculating them into percentages. So it's not causal, it's not science. You can bring it up if you want, but it's not like a key piece of information. So keep that in mind. You should be using APA formatting, but only for your in-text citations and the reference page. So because everything, in this class says APA formatting, but I never ever mean that you should do double spaced and 1-inch margins and include your name and the date and the class number on the top. That's not what I mean. I just mean in terms of quoting sources, you're going to follow APA formatting as opposed to Chicago style or MLA or whatever. APA is just the most generally used formatting outside of academia. So that's why we use it in this class, just so you gain more experience with what you might see out there. There's not a whole lot of reference pages in the real world though, guys. Most of the time, people will just put in like a hyperlink to link back out to the source, and that's fine in a business setting. Of course, this is college, so we just want to reinforce the APA stuff as, just to help. So that's that. Okay, so this next segment of the meeting is going to be about using persuasion in writing. So, we've already learned a lot about memos and the direct approach and our tone and how to format things. And we're going to be using all of that now in Unit 3, but we're going to build onto it by starting to implement persuasive strategies within your writing. And you should do this intentionally. So what I'm going to do is share 10 of the strongest techniques for persuasive writing. And then you should consider what you want to write in your memo. Like if you're going to start by drafting an outline or you have key ideas, that's a good idea, because then you can see which of these techniques are going to fit the best with your specific ideas. You probably won't use all 10. You might just really rely on 2, or you might kind of splatter like 4 or 5 of them. So yeah, without further ado, I'm just going to go through these 10 techniques as quickly as I can. The intro, I suppose, to persuasion starts with how you think about it. So everybody is familiar with how to be persuasive, and some people are just naturally better at persuading than others, but we all try, and we have been since we were like little kids. So we would try to persuade our parents, for example, if I can eat this cookie now, I promise I will finish my dinner later, right? So we're bartering a little bit. We're offering something that our audience wants on a primary level, which is using logic. As we get older, we tend to understand the nuances of convincing and persuading a little bit better. So we might try to persuade our parents and say something like, I really need to drive like a Ford F-150 or a Hummer to keep me safe on the roads. And so this is appealing to parents' sense of pathos, right? Their emotional need for their child to be safe, especially in that scary moment when their child hits the road for the first time. So the bigger, the better, right? So you can make this kind of argument that's now appealing to both logos and pathos. So we start to bring it together. And then now as adults, usually most of us are pretty good at least attempting to persuade others to get what we want. And that might be something like that happens at work. Say you want a raise and you have to persuade your boss to give it to you. So you're going to name, specific qualities that you have or strengths that you have, which is going to probably touch on ethos, pathos, and logos. All right, so now we'll jump right in. The first tip is to be authoritative and establish credibility. This really rests in two separate areas, one being your qualifications and connections, and the other one being research and background. So we're thinking about what relevant qualifications do you have as Joe to be writing this letter, and how can you showcase those as a way to build your credibility right from the top? Obviously, the second point is like thinking not so much about this assignment, but just the broader picture. Does your connection to the topic really build credibility? So if it doesn't, then you wouldn't include it. You don't want to try to fluff yourself up to make yourself seem credible. But if your connection to it definitely buys you credibility, then you definitely want to highlight it. And then thinking about research always strengthens ideas because, well, and the idea, of course, is that you have an idea that is backed by research, which makes the idea more credible. And then what kind of background information is necessary for you to build credibility? And that one is directly relevant to the Rocky Mountain memo, because we know that Zach is not very educated when it comes to fitness and well-being. And we can't just start spouting things out without making sure that he knows the basics. So in this case, just like with Unit 1, where you knew your reader didn't have a whole lot of background information, you had to supply some of that. And most of you used these statistics to help provide them with some understanding of how LinkedIn was relevant to business. Well, in this case, similar scenario. Zach doesn't know much about fitness. We need to help him understand a little bit more in order for him to take action on what we want. Tip number, or this is tip 1.5. Tone is important when you're establishing credibility. So the guy on the left is, well, I'll start with the guy on the right, actually. The guy on the right is authoritative, right? He's confident. He's giving you the thumbs up. He seems like he's someone who's in charge. The guy on the left is not authoritative. He's aggressive. He's in your face. He's telling you what to do and telling you to do it now. That doesn't work ever, first of all, but certainly not when you're writing up the ladder. It's completely inappropriate. So don't misunderstand the previous slide about being authoritative to mean that you should be pushy and aggressive. It's just assertive and confident. All right, finally, on to step 2. So using rhetorical questions. This is a really easy strategy to implement, and it will level up your writing no matter what, if you're not already doing it. So a rhetorical question, we all know that phrase, but not a lot of people think it all the way through to understand why is it called a rhetorical question. So if I say to my son, would you like to be grounded for the weekend? That is a rhetorical question because I'm not asking the question to get an answer. I'm asking it to have an effect, right? So just like all other rhetorical strategies, for example, we use in Unit 1, many of you chose to use a really positive, upbeat, and exciting tone to the memo to try to get your readers to feel that enthusiasm and maybe even be excited. I got off track there. So you might, I really did. I got really excited about that point, and then I got off track. So with the rhetorical question, again, you're just building it in to set a tone. And I guess the connection is that rhetorical questions are usually connected to tone and to pathos because you can use them to get a certain emotion. just like my example, do you want to be grounded this weekend? I'm hoping to elicit fear and obedience, right? That's what I'm looking for by asking that question. So there's a couple of sample questions that are more relevant, I suppose, here, like, would you like the company to make more money? The reader's answer is obviously going to be, yeah, that would be great. Tell me how I can do that. Would you like employees to be happier at work? Like, yeah, definitely. Happy employees are productive employees. Again, tell me more. And then you can, so that's like the rainbows and sunshine approach. You can also flip it and do the doom and gloom approach. And ask something like, how would you feel if the company had to let 10 people go? Right? Like, gosh, I would like to avoid that. Tell me more. How can I avoid it? So again, these questions are getting a type of emotion to come out and then also garnering interest in the next thing that you're going to say. Okay, so number 3 is to use repetition. And by that, I don't mean repeat words. Obviously, you want to avoid repeating the same words over and over again, but you want to repeat key ideas and themes. So I'm not going to read through this whole example, but essentially what it is a paragraph explaining, actually, it's faster to read it. So I deserve an A on this assignment because of the hard work that I've done. Over the past 2 weeks, I have spent countless hours researching and brainstorming. Even though I was initially confused, I reviewed the instructions and asked questions until I was on the right track. I believe my efforts have earned me an A. So this was a long time ago. I used to teach freshman comp, and I would sometimes ask students to provide a justification or a persuasive argument about what grade they thought they deserved. And what you can see is a theme emerging here. We had the underlined words like deserve, hard work, countless hours. I reviewed the instructions, asked questions, efforts, and earned, right? So all those terms that are underlined, they're working together as a theme to kind of paint a cohesive picture and guide the reader where I want them to go. Be consistent, and this actually is connected with the repetition. Be consistent with your theme. You're not just looking at that on the paragraph level, you're looking at it for the entire document. So the more holistic or macro level. The same thing with your tone. Don't start off super friendly and then get demanding at the end, or vice versa. You want to maintain like you should not have multiple personalities. You should be one person through the whole entire document. Okay, looking at number 5, offer reasons for your argument. And it seems obvious, but a lot of times when people offer reasons, they just tell the reader what they should do. So they're not really reasons, they're more like directives, like we should keep the fitness center open. Okay, that's just telling me what I should do. You have to follow it up by explaining why. So pretty much every time you're giving one of these we need to do this statements, you need to support it with at least one, if not 2 or 3 why reasons to make it strong. In other words, explain yourself. Very simple. Just explain yourself. Number 6 is using comparisons. So these can be like metaphors, similes, analogies. We don't even need those fancy words. Like everybody knows what a comparison is, right? It's when you say like, this bowl is, that's terrible. A comparison is talking about 2 different things and either stating how they are alike or how they are different, or helping someone understand what something is if they've never seen it before, or if they're unfamiliar with the idea. So as an example, a written example there on the bottom left, it says, happy employees are like kids on Halloween, motivated to work hard for their rewards. So that's a verbal comparison, or a written or verbal comparison that could paint a picture of employees who have smiles on their faces and they're really excited to do all their hard work because the rewards are worth it. Just like kids who are going door to door to door, rain, sleet, snow, whatever it may be, for their reward. So it's just kind of, bringing together the ideas of excitement and working hard in a way that might be more understandable. The image there is also meant to be a comparison. So it could be used in a discussion maybe about like an independent coffee shop that wants to set up in a town that is filled with Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. So all of these shark fins are the big chains, and the independent store owner is up here, and he's got to walk a really tight line in order to stay a cut above, right? In order to survive. Otherwise, he'll just get eaten up by the big business. So if you were writing on that topic, including this image somewhere would be a really cool way to explain that concept. Number 7 is my favorite. So it's agitate and solve. So you can think about that, like agitating is like shaking something up and getting it really irritated, right? Or as they would call it, like stirring the pot, and then solve the problem. So if you have a reader who's not really emotionally invested in what you're saying, like they don't care that much, you have to make them care before you can get them on board. The way you do that is you annoy them in ways that, are relevant to them and personal to them. So you demonstrate the problem on the front end of your paper or your discussion, and then they're irritated and they're like, gosh, I don't like this. This is terrible. Do you know a way to fix this? Why, yes, I do. Then the second half or the back end shows how your idea solves their now agitation or irritation that you kind of helped created or intensified. And the way that applies, it applies everywhere, obviously, but here you might think in terms of, you know, really going on thick with the negative statistics about what can happen when employees are, using a lot of their medical benefits, they're calling off all the time, you have high turnover, things like that. So if you can get him scared and annoyed with the prospect of this and then solve your idea on the back end, you have a better chance of convincing him. Number 8, super, super important, predict the results. So that means that you want to give your reader some idea of what to expect if they go your way. So in this case, if Zach is going to go ahead with the fitness center, what can you expect to happen after that? Don't leave that up to his imagination, because he will probably not be able to come up with anything great or exciting since he's opposed. So tell him all the good things. If you follow my recommendations, A, B, and C are certain to happen within the next 6 months. I envision a company where healthy, happy employees, blah, 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 right? So you want to usually point your reader in the direction where you want to lead them. It's okay to kind of like directly lead them there too, but you can't tell them what to do. You can just give them excitement about if they do it. So let them think it was their idea, type of thing. Number 9, also super important, probably the most important one that's applicable to all of your writing, and here as well. So you want to always, if time allows, I understand that not everyone is spending hours and hours and hours on homework assignments or writing in general, but if you have the timing, or if it's something very important to you, stopping after you've written and you're happy with what you've written and giving yourself like a day. Usually you need like a full day to kind of get out of that space, and then go back and read what you wrote, except you have to completely be the reader. So it's almost, like acting. You have to really get into that mind frame of, in this case, Zach, who thinks fitness is dumb, and who thinks the fitness center needs to go and be repurposed. It's just a waste of space. When you read your document, hate it, hate it just the way that Zach would, so that you can try to put your finger on any objections that he may have as he's reading. So every time as you're reading, as Joe, who hates what he's reading, or as Zach, who hates what he's reading, you make however, I guess most of us don't print and revise by hand, but you make a comment, make a note, go in right there and fix it. Eliminate those objections right from the beginning, and you smooth the path for yourself to get a yes. Essentially, you're providing answers and solutions before they have a chance to object. So if you're having a hard time getting into that headspace, these are starter questions that are kind of in opposition to ideas. So like, well, but what if ABC happens? Or I'm not sure about this part of the idea. Or how will you actually execute that on time and make it happen the way it's supposed to? So again, thinking of these questions, working on your writing so that it incorporates the answers. And number 10 is just a reminder about logos, pathos, and ethos. Those are all persuasive tools that you should be using with intention. So don't forget about those just because we have 9 other cool persuasive techniques. Okay, overview, you know what they are. We went through all 10 of them. I think I will put this PowerPoint up with the link to the recording as well. So if you want to go through these 10 like in your own pace, then you can just open the PowerPoint and slide through. So wrapping up for today, the due date for this assignment is Sunday, which is 2 weeks from yesterday. I see that there's like an error in Brightspace where the elevator pitches and LinkedIn profiles are actually due on the 14th. And I know I said that in a meeting too. So that is when they're due. They should have been due yesterday on the 12th. So you guys kind of got a little bonus extension on that. But unit 3 does still start today. So make sure that you're checking in on the discussion board. And as always, just let me know if you have questions. So, oh, and I do have about 5 or 6 outstanding cover letter resumes to grade. I'm sorry that those have taken a little bit longer. I'm intending to finish those up by tonight. All right. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and just head back into the chat area. If you don't have any questions, you can feel free to hop out. If you do, you can type them in or just unmute and ask.
So our elevator pitch is due tomorrow night, according to Brightspace. Is that still correct?
Yep, that's still correct.
Okay. All right. And just one more question about the elevator pitch. Is that is geared to the job ad that we were applying for, correct? Or is it just a general elevator pitch?
You can go either way, whichever you think is more beneficial for you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good one.